How to love without losing yourself. Stoicism and emotionally free relationships. Have you ever been afraid to love again? Not because you don't want to, but because you know what it cost you the last time. After fighting so hard to heal, to protect your inner peace, to rebuild your emotional strength, letting someone in again feels like a risk, as if one wrong step could undo everything you've worked for, as if opening your heart might mean losing yourself all over again. This tension between protecting your freedom and opening up to human connection is one of the most silent pains on the path of emotional healing. Throughout this series, you've been invited to dive deep into Stoic teachings, not just as abstract ideas, but as tools for real life, where pain is real, relationships leave marks, and healing is not a concept, but a daily practice. We've talked about loss, rejection, love, detachment, solitude, limits, and emotional integrity. Each video was a stepping stone. And now, you may find yourself with more clarity, more self-compassion, and above all, more strength. But the strength you've gained must be preserved, especially in relationships. Because life is made of connections, and true freedom isn't found in isolation, but in the ability to stay whole, even while choosing to walk beside someone else. This is where Stoicism shines the brightest, showing us how to live with others without abandoning ourselves. In this final episode of the series, we'll explore how to build conscious relationships without giving up your emotional freedom. We'll unpack why love doesn't need to be control, how friendship doesn't have to mean self-sacrifice, and how presence can coexist with autonomy. You'll learn how to stay rooted in yourself, even in the presence of someone else. How to cultivate mature, respectful, and truthful connections that do not demand your disappearance in the process. Because one of the greatest signs of emotional maturity is this: to remain whole, even when choosing to share your life with someone. And as we close this chapter of self-discovery and healing, we leave you with one final question. If you've already learned how to rebuild yourself, are you ready to stay strong, even when the world around you tries to shake that foundation? The Stoic journey doesn't end with healing. It continues. In chaos, under pressure, in the unexpected. And it's there that we discover whether our inner freedom is truly rooted, or just rehearsed. Part 1. The freedom of remaining whole. One of the greatest illusions we carry when it comes to love and emotional bonds is the belief that being with someone requires us to give up ourselves. Phrases like, relationships require sacrifice, or, to love is to give yourself completely, are often romanticized, repeated, and rarely questioned. But through the lens of Stoicism, this idea becomes dangerously distorted, because it prepares us to give, but not to balance. It trains us to be good partners, but not necessarily whole human beings. Epictetus said we must guard our own judgment as something sacred. And what is that judgment if not the awareness of our own essence? What we think, feel, and believe. All of this forms the core of our integrity. When we enter relationships without emotional maturity, we begin to compromise this core. We say yes when we mean no, give in when we should stand firm, and silence ourselves when our inner voice is crying out to be heard. Many confuse presence with submission. They think that to be worthy of love, they must become more agreeable, more adaptable, less themselves. But a true relationship is not a mold. It's a mirror. It shouldn't reshape you to fit into it, but help you see yourself more clearly within it. Stoicism teaches us that no relationship is worth the loss of who you are, because inner freedom is the most precious treasure you can gain, and once gained, it should never be traded away. Being whole doesn't mean being rigid. It's not selfishness or coldness. It is, in fact, the most honest way to love, with presence, but without erasure. With generosity, but without self-abandonment. With openness, but without losing your voice. Conscious relationships are built between two whole people, and this is where Stoicism becomes a guiding light, reminding us that the only thing that truly belongs to us is what we cultivate within, our thoughts, our values, our choices. And any relationship that asks you to give that up is not love. It's captivity. Let this be the first truth you carry with you. Emotional freedom begins the moment you realize you don't need to stop being who you are in order to be with someone, and no genuine connection will ever demand that from you. Part 2. The half-orange myth. Love or emotional dependency. From an early age, we're subtly taught that we're incomplete, that somewhere out there exists someone made to complete us. The idea of a soulmate, or of being someone's other half, is sold to us as romantic, poetic. But it hides a dangerous trap, the belief that, on our own, we're not enough. That true happiness can only be found when someone else fills the spaces we cannot. From a Stoic perspective, this belief isn't just immature, it's emotionally unsustainable. Because when you place the burden of your wholeness onto another person, you also hand them your peace, your emotional stability, and your sense of self. You start depending on their affection, their presence, their validation to feel balanced. And any philosophy that teaches dependence as a form of love is teaching, in truth, a form of subtle imprisonment. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." That is, happiness comes from within, not from others. Believing that someone else can save or fix you completely contradicts this principle. For the Stoics, what saves us is reason, virtue, self-awareness, and those are cultivated within, not found in someone's arms. When two people enter a relationship expecting the other to fill their voids, the outcome is almost always frustration, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Because the other will never know exactly what you're missing. And it's not their job to fill it. That work is yours. And once you understand that, you begin to free yourself from the chains of emotional dependency disguised as love. To love stoically is different. It's not about seeking a savior, but a companion on the path. Someone you can grow with, not hide behind. Someone who respects you, challenges you, supports you, and walks beside you, not above or below. So the real question isn't, who will complete me? It's, with whom can I share my wholeness? Because only when you stop looking for a missing half do you become capable of experiencing love that is mature, conscious, and free. Love that isn't about filling a void, but about overflowing together. Part 3. Boundaries don't push people away. They protect what matters. There's a common misconception that setting boundaries creates distance. That saying no means you're being cold, rigid, or unloving. But Stoicism reminds us of a deeper truth. Love without clarity turns into confusion, and there is no true connection without well-defined limits. Seneca once wrote, "A person who is consistent in their decisions lives more lightly." The same applies to our relationships. When you know what you can allow, what you will not accept, how far you're willing to go, and where you must draw the line, life becomes lighter. You no longer live at the mercy of others, nor carry the guilt of failing to meet expectations that were never yours to begin with. A healthy boundary is not a wall, it's a frame. It doesn't push people away. It protects what's sacred within you. It allows you to remain in a relationship without losing your identity, without folding from fear of rejection, without betraying yourself just to keep the peace. Unfortunately, most people only begin to set boundaries after they've been crossed, drained, or emotionally broken. And even then, they often feel guilty. Guilty for needing to protect themselves. Guilty for no longer being able to carry what was never theirs to hold. But Stoic philosophy reminds us, we don't control others, only our own choices. And that includes the choice to protect our emotional integrity. Saying no when necessary can be the highest form of self-respect, and also an act of respect toward the other. Because by expressing where you stand, you allow the other to take responsibility for their own emotions, expectations, and behavior. Yes, setting boundaries can bring discomfort. It may create distance, but here's a hard truth. Those who walk away because you spoke your truth were never truly close. They were attached to your silence, your compliance, your convenience, not to who you really are. Stoicism teaches us to be firm like a rock, but accessible like a harbor. That balance is only possible when we understand. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They're the foundation that allows love to be free, safe, and real. Part 4. A presence that doesn't erase you. How to be with someone without disappearing. There's a kind of presence that heals, and another that consumes. A presence that nurtures, and another that invades. Knowing the difference is the key to building a healthy connection, or falling, once again, into the quiet patterns of self-erasure. Often we enter relationships with the best intentions. We want to show up, to prove we care, to be available, loyal, supportive. But slowly, without realizing it, we start softening our edges. We adjust our words to seem less intense. We smile through discomfort to avoid conflict. We suppress our preferences, minimize our needs, and slowly step back from ourselves, all in the name of being fully present. For the Stoics, true presence is rooted in awareness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be attentive to what you're doing at every moment. Be honest in thought, feeling, and action." That kind of attention also applies to how we show up in relationships. It's not enough to just be there. What matters is how you're there. Are you whole or diluted? Available or submissive? Present, but still yourself? Many were taught that love means fusion, that the more you blend into the other, the deeper the bond. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. The more aware you are of yourself, the freer and more loving your presence becomes. Because it doesn't demand, it doesn't manipulate, it doesn't consume. It simply offers itself, anchored in mutual respect and inner clarity. To be with someone without disappearing takes courage. The courage to say, "I want to be with you," without that meaning, "I will abandon myself to do so." And this balance isn't found in formulas. It's cultivated through self-awareness, strong values, and daily choices. True presence doesn't erase you. It illuminates you. It invites the other person to remain whole as well. It creates a safe space where both people can exist fully, without roles, without games, without forced fusion. When you learn how to be with another without dimming your light, you break the cycle of emotional dependency. And in its place, you begin to build conscious connection, where love is not born from absence of self, but from the mutual decision to stay while remaining whole. Part 5. Invisible expectations. The silent chains in relationships. Not all emotional prisons are loud. Some come wrapped in silence, in small repeated concessions, in glances that carry unspoken demands, in hopes and obligations that were never clearly expressed, yet still weigh on you like a duty. These are invisible expectations, chains we carry not because someone forced them on us, but because we were conditioned to believe we must. In Stoicism, one of the most liberating principles is the dichotomy of control, learning to distinguish what depends on you from what does not. Other people's expectations, especially the unspoken ones, fall into the second category. And when you begin to shape yourself around them, trying to meet needs that were never clearly stated or agreed upon, you end up emotionally exhausted and detached from your truth. More often than not, what wounds us most in relationships isn't open conflict, it's the silent pressure. The feeling that you should have known what the other person needed, that it was expected of you to do more, say more, be more cheerful, be more available. Even when no word is spoken, you sense the weight of someone else's disappointment, as if loving meant anticipating needs you never agreed to meet. For the Stoics, clarity is a form of freedom. Seneca reminds us that no wind is favorable to the sailor who doesn't know where he's going. And the same is true for our emotional lives. When we're in relationships without clarity, we drift in directions that don't reflect who we are, responding to expectations that were never made explicit, but silently control us. Building conscious relationships means learning to identify these invisible currents, the ones that guide your behavior based on guilt, obligation, or fear. The silent contracts you never signed, but still feel bound to honor. These expectations are not love. They are traps, and unless brought to light, they will keep dictating how you show up. Stoicism teaches us to take responsibility for our own choices and to release what is not ours to carry. You are not responsible for the fantasies others build in silence. Your responsibility lies in the truth you live, the presence you offer, and the respect you maintain for both the other and yourself. Letting go of invisible expectations may disappoint others, It may break illusions. It may disturb the peace. But in doing so, you create the space for a real connection. One rooted in honesty, not assumption. A connection where no one has to guess. Where love can finally breathe. Part 6. The courage to stop shaping yourself. Connecting without shrinking. There's a kind of suffering that doesn't scream. It hides in the smallest acts of adaptation. In the way you change how you speak so you don't seem too much. In the smile you force when something bothers you, just to keep things peaceful. In the quiet concessions you make, not out of choice, but from the fear of being hard to love. This quiet suffering takes root when you believe that, in order to be accepted, you have to reshape yourself. Stoic philosophy is clear. Anything that depends on pretense, self-abandonment, or emotional manipulation cannot be called virtue, and being in a relationship should never be a performance. It should be truth, wholeness, steadiness. As Epictetus wrote, if you want to improve, be prepared to be laughed at. That improvement often begins when you stop trying so hard to fit into spaces that were never built for who you really are. How many times have you softened your intensity, hidden your values, downplayed your accomplishments, or disguised your pain, all just to avoid making others uncomfortable? How many times have you felt the need to edit yourself, simply to be loved? The problem is, when you constantly reshape yourself to fit, you begin to forget who you really are. And even if the other person stays, what do they actually love? Is it you? Or is it the carefully adjusted version you presented, trimmed, quieted, polished? For the Stoics, integrity is non-negotiable. And that applies to relationships too. If you have to shrink to belong, that relationship is not welcoming you. It's swallowing you. Real love doesn't require disguises. Real friendship doesn't demand masks. Honest presence can only exist when you have the courage to remain who you are, even when that makes others uncomfortable. Yes, it takes courage. The courage to uphold your essence in a world, or relationship, that subtly urges you to adapt. The courage not to stay silent when something hurts. The courage not to apologize for simply being yourself. But it is this kind of courage that builds strong, lasting connections, because when you stay whole, you give the other person permission to be real too. And when two whole people meet, there is no performance, only connection. To relate without reshaping yourself is the beginning of a new way of relating, more conscious, more honest, more free, where the bond isn't born of fear or need, but of clarity, mutual choice, and respect. Part 7. Bonds without chains. Love is not control. What happens when we mistake love for possession? When we start believing that, to ensure someone stays, we must monitor their steps, shape their choices, manage their feelings. In many relationships, this confusion doesn't look like control. It looks like care, concern, protection. But over time, what began as affection turns into surveillance. What once felt like closeness turns into pressure. And what was once connection becomes captivity. Stoicism warns us, the tighter you try to grip something, the more it slips through your hands. Because the need to control reveals something deeper, fear. A fear of loss. A fear of rejection. A fear that you are not enough on your own. And when that fear goes unexamined, it poisons the relationship. Love becomes domination in disguise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Love those with whom fate has brought you together, but do so with all your heart." But to truly love means to let go, to trust, to allow the other person to be, even when they don't meet every expectation, even when their choices challenge your comfort. Many believe that trying to control someone is a way to protect the relationship, but what they're really protecting is an illusion of safety. Stoicism teaches us to embrace impermanence. Even in our bonds, nothing is guaranteed. No relationship is eternal by force. Everything is subject to change. That's why we must learn to love without clinging. Control comes from anxiety, from the inability to manage our own thoughts and fears, from the urge to avoid future pain by planting control in the present. But that only creates suffering now, in the name of a loss that hasn't even happened yet. A mature bond needs space, room to breathe, room for choices to be made freely, not out of obligation. And that's only possible when you stop trying to secure the other person and instead start building trust. If it's real love, they'll stay. Not because they're trapped, but because they're free. To the Stoics, inner freedom is the highest good. And when two free people choose to walk together, their bond is stronger than any chain. Because it isn't born of fear, but of truth. So if you love someone, don't imprison them. Let them be. And make sure you are too. Because real love isn't about control. It's about free presence. And every free presence is, in itself, a revolution. Part 8. Choosing to stay. The power of intentional presence. In real relationships, no one stays out of obligation. They stay because they choose to. And that conscious choice turns any connection into a space of freedom, not dependence. Being with someone because you want to, not because you need to, completely transforms the way you love, the way you listen, and the way you care. Presence becomes an act of intention, not fear. Stoicism teaches us to live with purpose, not just reacting to life, but choosing how to live based on values, not impulses. This applies directly to how we relate to others. Being with someone, every day, despite differences, despite discomforts, despite the unpredictability of life, is a decision. A quiet renewal of commitment. A daily practice of being. Seneca wrote, "No wind is favorable to one who does not know where they are going." The same is true for relationships. When people stay together out of habit, convenience, or fear of loneliness, they may float, but they never truly move forward. The connection remains, but it doesn't grow. Being in a relationship, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, requires the emotional maturity to stay not out of desperation, but out of conscious desire. It's the ability to commit even in the absence of certainty, because you're not there hoping the other person will complete you. You're there to share who you already are. You could leave at any time, and yet you choose to stay. And it's exactly that freedom to leave that makes staying so meaningful. When there are no chains, no forced roles, no guilt-driven ties, the decision to remain is rich with truth. It's not about being needed. It's about being wanted. And that's infinitely more powerful. To relate stoically is to be present not out of emotional hunger, but out of inner coherence. You know you are whole. You know you are enough. And so, your presence isn't a cry for help, it's an offering of your most honest self. That conscious decision, to stay as a free being, transforms every relationship. Because when no one is forced to be there, when both people choose each other again and again, even in uncertainty, what emerges is sacred, not because it's permanent, but because it's real. Part 9. The freedom to feel without making others responsible. One of the clearest signs of emotional maturity is realizing that what you feel is your responsibility, even when someone else triggers it. This is one of Stoicism's most difficult and liberating truths. No one makes you feel anything. Your emotions are your own. The way you interpret, react to, and carry them belongs to you. Others may spark the reaction, but the emotional response is yours to manage. So many relationships become toxic because they operate under a logic of blame. You hurt me. You made me insecure. You made me feel rejected. But Stoicism calls us to a shift in perspective. As Epictetus said, it's not events that disturb us, but the judgments we make about them. And that includes emotional events. The coldness, the withdrawal, the words said and unsaid, the gestures that sting. When you place responsibility for your emotions onto someone else, you also give them power over your inner life. You become dependent on their actions, their presence, their approval to feel okay. This isn't love, it's emotional outsourcing. And the more you do it, the more fragile you become. To relate consciously is to recognize that yes, others can affect you, but they cannot control you. Their actions may touch you, even deeply, but the way you process that experience, what you do with it, how you express or integrate it, that's your work. And taking ownership of it doesn't make you cold, it makes you strong. It returns you to the center of your own life. It also protects you from one of the most common emotional manipulations: subtle guilt. When someone says, "If you loved me, you wouldn't make me feel this way," they are, intentionally or not, using pain to control. Stoicism helps you break this pattern. In a healthy relationship, each person tends to their own emotional garden, without blaming the other for its weeds. This doesn't mean repressing what you feel. It means taking full ownership of it, speaking your truth without blaming, feeling hurt without needing the other person to change who they are to make it stop. That's power. That's clarity. That's emotional sovereignty. A conscious relationship is built between two adults, both aware of their own shadows and limits, both committed to sharing life from a place of wholeness, not projection. No guilt games, no emotional power struggles. When this happens, a sacred space opens, a place where emotion is allowed, but not weaponized, where impact is real, but imprisonment is not, where truth leads and freedom remains intact. Part 10. When love means choosing consciously without abandoning yourself. We've reached the end of a journey, and perhaps now you see that this ending is actually the beginning of something deeper, a new way of being in the world, of seeing yourself, of connecting with others. Because after all the truths we've explored about loss, rejection, solitude, integrity, limits, and presence, it's impossible to return to the old way of relating. You've changed, and that change is yours to keep. Stoicism has taught us that a good life isn't one without pain. It's one lived with awareness. That freedom doesn't come from avoiding relationships, but from remaining whole within them. That true love never demands your disappearance, your silence, or your shrinking. It demands presence, mutual respect, and the courage to choose someone without losing yourself in the process. To relate consciously is to know that love is not urgency. It's not desperation. It's not emotional starvation. It's a quiet decision made by someone who has learned to be whole on their own, and who, because of that, can share their wholeness without fear of dissolving. It takes courage to remain firm when everything around you tries to push you back into old patterns. Courage to say no when everyone expects a yes. Courage to walk away from relationships that no longer match the person you've become. Courage to stay silent when manipulation screams. Courage to stay present when it would be easier to shut down. Stoic philosophy isn't about isolation, it's about inner freedom. And freedom inside a relationship is the ability to remain with another without ceasing to remain with yourself. So now, the real question is, are you ready to live relationships that don't reshape you but respect you? That don't smother you but inspire you? That don't demand your absence but invite your truth? Because now you know. To love is not to disappear in someone else. It's to remain whole, even while choosing to share your life. This may be the final episode in our series, but it's not the end of your journey. Because the world will still test you. It will try to shake your peace. It will press the same old buttons. It will challenge your sense of worth. And when that happens, how will you respond? The next step is learning how to remain calm in the storm, because the freedom you've built here must be protected with resilience, and you've already begun. This isn't just a comment, it's a personal commitment to your emotional freedom. And if there was a moment in this video that truly resonated with you, share it in the comments. Your story may help others recognize patterns that no longer serve them. And don't forget to subscribe. Each video on this channel is an invitation to deepen your inner strength and live with more presence, truth, and purpose. We'll see you in the next chapter of the journey.